Well, hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to half of the Joe Weather Show. Mr. Rayo, I thought he'd be here by now, but he should be strolling in momentarily. And as you may have or may not have seen, I mentioned in the chat earlier, and I'm going to I'm just trying to reset here so I could see you guys. Your response is a lot easier once we go to full screens, but. We were planning. Joe and I both work for FiOS One News, which is just outside. For those of you who are not in the New York area, we provide news and weather for 3 zones: Long Island, New Jersey, and the Hudson Valley. And it's been no secret. We announced this about a few months ago. Was that we were going to be shut down as of November 15th. Well, we found out today that we're going to be shut down as of November 13th, which is tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be our last night. We were planning to go all week and finish off on Friday, where Joe and I are actually physically together in the same building, but that is not to be, Mr. Rayo.
Yes.
So this is our next to last.
Our penultimate
Yes.
Joe and Joe.
So it's not our. By the way, it's not our last show together because
we're going to be Skyping.
We have plans. I'm going to Skype him in, and come on. Yes, we didn't plan this.
We're waving the red flag.
Yeah, but exactly. So yeah, I'll be Skyping him in. We might not be able to do it every day or every other day, but if we can get it in there once or twice a week or once a week, I think that would work. So we're not going away. I'm not going away. I have my online presence with my YouTube channel, my subscription platform on Patreon, 2 free weather apps, which, by the way, you can really use anywhere. You don't have to live in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area to use it.
Even the most parsimonious weather person, will love free, and that's what Joe offers is free.
Yes, but just don't rub it in. I have people that rub it to say every once in a while. I'll have somebody saying, why should I pay for something when I can get it for free? You're right. You shouldn't pay it if you can get it for free.
Sure.
You're just not going to get it for free from me. And then they get blocked and banned. But no, seriously, just if you haven't downloaded the app, download the app. It is absolutely free, and there's 2 of them. There's mine, meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and Angry.
Download the app. It's absolutely free.
Yes.
I'm hot tonight, Joe.
You are. You're rolling. Yeah, I don't know what kind of trouble we're going to get into if you keep rolling along those lines, but all right. So anyway, there's that, my app, and the Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman. So we could talk about our own situation first, or we can talk about weather. What do you want to do first?
We might as well talk about the weather, which for some, you had a cheap thrill today with a few snowflakes out there.
I saw it. I saw the snowflakes. Actually, they had a little bad that lasted about a half an hour along the New Jersey shore of moderate snow that developed, which was, it actually wound up snowing heavier down near the coastal areas than it did in inland spots. I mean, no one got anything out of it. It didn't stick. I know they're heavily salting roadways even as we speak. They have the Morton salt all over the place. I just got to say, though, I am astounded by the reaction of all off of that storm from last year. The November storm from last year. It just continues. I thought maybe they would have forgotten a little bit about it and gotten a little less ridiculous. But
no, they had to bring it. They had to bring it back in advance of this semi-atrocity today.
Right.
And say, well, you may remember last year at this time we had, and then they immediately go into the file footage of people, stuck on the roadways in 3 to 6 inches of snow.
Right. Well,
giving you the impression
that we never
the impression that that's what was coming today, or
right. No, I know. It really is. It goes to the frustration of what we do for a living.
I worked for 2 years as the morning meteorologist on 1010 Winds in New York, the most listened to radio station in the country. And one thing that they did, they sat me down before I got started and said, you got to understand one thing. You are going to drive our station. Weather is the thing that drives our station. Bad weather is what drives our station and brings up the ratings. So the more bad weather we have and the more you play it up, the better it is for us and better for the ratings. And I learned something that day, and that is that probably what every broadcasting outlet has learned since, which is if there's even the little modicum of bad weather, go after it. Play it up, because ratings go up, and that makes the sponsors.
I guess the part that drives me crazy is that the conversation is who drives the conversation. Once upon a time, it was a battle between us driving the conversation and the newsroom driving the conversation. It was basically between the two of us. So you had a certain amount of control that way. You could say, no, you can't say this, you shouldn't say that, you need to change this, you need to change that. The conversation now is driven by folks, some professional and but mostly non-professional, driven by social media. Somebody will put something up, someone will see it, someone will run with it, and then of course, in the most uncreative, or if you want to be sarcastic about it, the most creative thing that we can do in this business is not do something until someone else does it, and then everybody does it.
Right.
And that's what happens. And then by that time, we have no control of the conversation anymore. And I gave up. I gave up a number of years ago, even just trying to stay ahead of the game, because it was just futile. I just know what I say and do. I can't control anymore what other people say and do, no matter how foolish it winds up looking. You get to a place where you throw your hands up.
There are some outlets that really don't even care, I think, in whether or not either you or I or the forecaster is disseminating the proper weather information. Case in point, Harvey Leonard, who is a legend now in Boston. It used to be the legend was Don Kent, but Don Kent passed away a number of years ago. Harvey has been doing the weather in Boston now for, I think, at least 30 years. And he once told a story at a convention where there was a storm. It might bring a big snowfall to Boston and southern New England. It might not. They were teetering on the edge. And just before airtime, the executive producer said, "We're sticking you outside in the cold weather to tell us all about the impending snowstorm." And Harvey said, if I'm stuck outside, I can't get the very latest weather data, which will determine whether or not we're going to have a big snow tomorrow or not. He said, "What do you want to do? You want to stick me outside and watch my face freeze?" And the executive producer said, "That's exactly what I prefer to have happen. I'd rather see your face freeze than you sitting in your nice warm weather center looking at all your numbers and charts." That, in the opinion of management, at that station at least, is what drove people to come and watch the newscast or the weathercast that night, depriving Harvey of a chance to look at the new, I guess it was the NGM, or maybe it was even the LFM or whatever back then, getting a chance to look at the new numbers and telling everybody, hey, we're not going to get the storm tomorrow, or hey, it's going to come, it's going to be bigger than we think. He couldn't say that. Instead, they preferred to have him outside with the microphone in very cold weather, watching him freeze his face off. That was what the suits decided upon that night.
Well,
and probably is what a lot of television stations would prefer to do.
Well, that's no longer going to be our issue, is it?
No, it's not. I just realized that.
And that's a good thing. I am perfect. Before we go on with this, I just want to say I'm really floored. Thank Johnny Quest, Timothy Veltman. Thank you so much for hitting Super Chat. I think you can see that there, Mr. Rayo. It's very generous.
Yeah.
One for each of us.
Oh.
Very generous.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you so much.
Good
now,
Lord.
Johnny said, Johnny Quest said that it was for the best weather forecaster on the web. So I won't put you on the spot as far as asking you which one.
Look,
Thank you.
I said when Joe was on Pix 11, I enjoyed watching him because they gave him the time to put out some of the best synopses on impending. What other weather did you see? For example, did you ever see any weather forecaster other than Joe give you a full description and an explanation of what the 50-50 low was?
Mm-hmm.
Or
I did all that stuff.
The Greenland block or whatever. I mean, I'd sit there and I was jealous of you. I said, why don't they give me enough time to do, explanations like this? And at the same time, though, as jealous as I was enjoying the heck out of it, listening.
Well, you know what? I just was very fortunate. I had a wonderful producer, Noreen Lark, who I worked with for many years. And she had, and we spoke about this before. She was here for a short time. She had the unenviable task of filling a 1-hour newscast on a Sunday night. Okay, with only one reporter in New York City, mind you. So there were times where she had like huge gaping holes in the show of 4 and 5 minutes. And she would just come to me and say, "Can you fill time?" And I said, "Well, how much time do you need me to fill?" And then she would say, "How long can you go?"
Put 4 fingers up.
Right. No, I didn't have to do that. She said, "Just go as long as you want." And she would essentially give me. I would say to her, "Look, Noreen, however much," because it was very deep in the show, and I would say to her, "Just let it run. Let me know right beforehand roughly how much time, and just as long as I get time cues, I can go on forever." And it was great because I got to do so much stuff.
I always said that I was a cockatoo in a canary cage when it came to time. Both at this particular outlet, I was very happy that this particular outlet gave me a chance to come here and not have to ferry all the way out to my old outlet, which is now no longer hyper-local, even though they claim that it is hyper-local. But I mean, all the times, all my 24 years in television, I always used to hear in my ear in my IFB the director saying, "Wrap it, Rayo, wrap it." I'd only go like 1:30, and already they were shutting me down or whatever. So I said, "I never get the chance. Joe Chiaffi gets 4 minutes. You get 1.5 minutes to talk."
Unbelievable.
But on the other hand, the one consultant that we had, Joe Revito, who Joe and I got together tremendously. I enjoyed when he came to dole out his pieces of advice to all of us. And he told me, he said, "Look, the people out there are only interested, most people are only interested in just the forecast." He said, "I know there are weather people out there who would love to hear you go
Forever.
5 minutes." He said, "But most of your viewership does not. All they're interested in is it going to be sunny on Saturday for my wife's picnic or for my daughter's wedding?"
Right.
That's all they're interested in. He said, so it was the KISS system, keep it simple, sweetie. And that's basically why. That's why I get 1.5 minutes and he gets 5 minutes.
Yep. Digger 310 has also popped super chat tonight. Thank you so much. All of you are very incredibly generous, and I'm really I'm floored. I'm just floored.
We should do this more often, Joe.
And Anthony Orr. Right, we should leave jobs more often. Yeah. Anthony Orr. Thank you. Anthony is one of our resident statisticians. With Scott Briller, the chairman, is first, and because Scott is always the first one on these chats, and Anthony Orr is right there with him. And Anthony has helped me out on a number of live streams along the way, of digging up stats left and right and just staying on top of things that I can't stay on top of anymore because my brain is like Jell-O. So thank you very much. And you know what? Let's do some weather. I have a lot of weather I want to do tonight because I cut a long range post. And it's on my on my Patreon platform, so my Patreon members already have read it, and it's also on the app. I put it out on the app about 30 minutes ago, and it just kind of touches upon a number of things that I have seen people say in the last several days regarding the weather patterns going on now, and what may or may not mean going forward. And when we get to it, you'll know where I'm getting at. So first off, since we're done with any kind of real threat for snow in most places except up in northern Montana, really the big story tonight has got to be the extensive freeze watches and warnings that are up all across the deep south and down all the way to the Gulf Coast and along the Florida Panhandle. And that's kind of where the wall is, Joe. When I bring up the temperatures, I've got the 7 o'clock temperatures up, and when you see them, you'll see how sharp that dividing line is.
Yeah.
But other than that, we've got still some lake effect nonsense going on. in northwest PA, northeast Ohio, and on up into upstate New York. And other than that, it's really pretty quiet. And the next system that we're going to be dealing with, as far as any kind of storminess, is probably going to be for the southeast. On the satellite loop, you can already see stuff down coming out of the Pacific subtropics and over Mexico and into Texas, those high clouds streaming northeastward. We're looking at a storm, I think, that's going to form in the northeast Gulf and then head for off the southeast coast. But I don't see that coming up the eastern seaboard.
You know, I was looking at the maps, synoptically speaking now, Friday and Saturday, and I said, gee, it's too bad that everything is not maybe a couple of 100 miles further to the west, because you've got this Gigunda high-pressure cell building on down into the northeastern states Friday night and Saturday, and you have a storm, a wet, soggy storm. I guess that's the one you were just alluding to, that by, let's say, the start of the weekend is going to be somewhere off the mid-Atlantic coast.
Right.
It's the classic setup with the high coming down and kind of squashing into that low, and I'm sure that just offshore, off the mid-Atlantic coast, at the start of the weekend, there are going to be some very strong winds, and probably also some wintry precipitation. But again, all of this is going to happen, I think, a couple 100 miles too far to the east for all that to take place. And if we get anything over the weekend, it'll probably be more clouds than anything else, fringe effects from that offshore storm, probably on Sunday. And that big cold high coming down, we'll be near 50 on Friday. We'll probably be back in the 30s again on Saturday.
This moderation is going to be really slow because of the fact that you've got this high going out up into New England is going to set up an onshore flow here on Thursday. So, and you're still going to have some cold air left over. I mentioned to you yesterday, I went for clouds coming in, especially for Long Island and for coastal New Jersey during the day on Thursday. I'm actually even a little bit wondering whether we might even see a little bit of spotty drizzle come in at some point along the immediate coast.
How about spotty freezing rain?
Well, look, if it, it's certainly cold enough.
That would only happen, I guess, if the boundary temperatures were really on the chilly or cold side, or if it didn't dislodge fast enough.
Right.
So,
well, the temperatures aren't going to go anywhere. I was thinking it may just kind of get into the upper 30s and low 40s if
Right.
the clouds up fast enough.
Right.
And you're right. We're going to bounce on Friday. It'll be the bounce day, back up to about 50 or so.
Right.
And that's still below average, by the way. And then from there, we will head
back
back,
down
as you
again.
said,
Go back
for
down.
Saturday and Sunday. And that's also going to come with a high to the north and a northeast wind.
Right.
So this is a fairly cold stretch. We're just seeing the extremes of it right now. And speaking of which, why don't I bring up the I got the current temperatures up and down the eastern seaboard. Hang on. There we go. Good. I don't have to rebuild the map. I haven't used the EDD, the electronic digital display from the Weather Service, in a while, so I had to kind of refresh myself on how to use it. And I made the numbers a little bit bigger. So these are 7 p.m. temperatures. And by the way, I did some quick numbers. We've got 5 hours, and I think if Islip had to get down to 25 or so to set the record for tonight. There are a number of stations that may set their record lows
Before midnight.
Before midnight, so
Right.
that's a distinct possibility. I think all the records are going to go tomorrow morning. The record low highs tomorrow are gone; those are going to get shattered.
Right.
And I also think if it's clear Wednesday night with a light northeast wind from the high to the north, there'll be a lot of areas getting radiational cooling. We might set records again Wednesday night and Thursday morning.
That's the one point.
It's a tougher call.
I
but-
might disagree with you on that. I'm thinking that already, maybe late tomorrow, we'll start seeing high clouds from upper
Right.
air, warm air advection, which may eventually develop into a broken or even overcast sky of mid and high level clouds during the night tomorrow night. So we'll see how that all plays out or pans out. Tonight, by the way, full moon. According to Indian lore, the November full moon is the Beaver full moon, and so you will have that moon lighting up the skies overnight tonight as the temperatures go down, down, down.
Unreal. It is cold. Look how cold it is, Joe, everywhere. I mean,
Right.
it's all the way back through the Midwest and Great Lakes. We're going to see single digits tonight.
This is a mid January or late January map.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of temperatures, even colder than what you normally see.
Well,
in
relatively
January.
speaking, I mean, if you take the anomalies for tomorrow and translate and seasonally adjust them for January, you're probably talking about highs, no higher than single digits to low teens.
Right.
And nighttime lows down near or below zero. For our area we're talking about, which doesn't see temperatures like that very often. But even now at 7 o'clock, you're only in the low and mid 40s, all the way down to the Florida Panhandle. Low 40s. I think New Orleans is 47, and Baton Rouge is 36. So that's cold. And then low 30s, 20s across northern Alabama, Mississippi, and all these places are going down into the teens tonight. Teens and low 20s tonight, except down near the immediate Gulf Coast.
Amazing. And
by the way, let me just stop for 1 second so I want to just acknowledge Mac Attack. Thank you very much. Izzy D, thank you very much from both of us, by the way, on Super Chat for hitting it. And, of course, the chairman, Scott Briller, has hit Super Chat again. Thank you so much. Everyone's generosity has really just kind of floored me in a huge way. And it's just the fact that you guys are here every single night is... I think it's wonderful. Thank you so much. And
I think what we're doing. I think Jerry Lewis described it best when he and Dean Martin were together for 10 years, and they were such a popular team. And he said all it amounted to was that the audience was just so happy to see two guys love to do what they were doing.
Yeah.
And you and I we've for God knows how many years, I don't even want to think about it. We just love the science of meteorology. And weather. I'll tell you another story about Joe. I was working at a private weather forecasting service in Flushing, Queens. This is back in the late 70s, and we had only just gotten to know each other. But once Joe got wind of the fact that I was working at a place that had weather equipment, teletype data,
I was so jealous,
and Difax facsimile maps that were coming in 24/7. And whenever we were close to a big storm, Joe, who lived up in the Bronx, would, like in the middle of the night sometimes, he would take a bus or a train or whatever and come away. What the hell are you doing here? I had to see the latest information.
I know. How spoiled everyone is now with the youngins who could just pull it up on the screen.
It's nothing.
But then again, the plus side is we're able to do this. Who knew we could have our own television channel?
It's amazing. But do you remember when? I don't remember what the year was, but when we started to realize that we could actually get some of this information at our homes, on our computers. And I said, Joe, I don't believe this. And I still remember what you said to me over the phone. He says, well, what are you waiting for? Foos away.
Exactly. The foos is a numerical product that we use. It's the model in numbers, basically.
It blew my mind that here, all of a sudden, I didn't have to travel to work. I didn't have to go there. I had it all right here in the comfort of my home.
It is amazing.
So you kids, you guys out there, you don't know what it's like to have to beg or borrow or do anything to get hold of weather information,
and
weather maps, and everything else. Oh, those are the days, Joe.
Oh, boy.
But then we have a lot of fun back
We
then.
did. Yeah. We just, we have fun now in different ways, though.
Yeah.
Mahogany. Mahogany's another one who's been a regular for a long time. Mahogany 2680. Thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. Both of us really appreciate it. So let's get back to the...
Joe, I was going to say, with all of this money, maybe we should retire.
Again.
All
right, so here's our surface map tonight, folks.
I just want to say one more thing. I was in like a low mood when I came in, kind of like a dour mood, and especially now knowing that tomorrow night is going to be probably the last time I get a chance to stand in front of a television camera.
Right.
After all of these years of doing this, but I got to all of you folks out there. I feel the same way now that Alex Trebek felt last night when they wrote, "We love you, Alex."
Yeah, it is. You're right. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
All right, so our big high. I don't have any Kleenex here, so don't lose it, okay?
No, I will.
We've got this big high getting ready to move in, and of course, one of the things, and it happens sometimes, you talk about trying to get a big storm to bring in cold air. This was actually brought in by a flat wave and a simple cold front.
Right.
There just wasn't anything, even though it was a fairly strong upper air trough, there really wasn't a whole lot for this to work on. There was hardly any Atlantic moisture, which is one of the reasons why we had so little precip here.
Right.
And of course, we got to see our first flakes. Now it's this very, very cold high moving eastward, and that's going to be pretty much the story here. I'm going to take you through the GFS model.
Now, is this 18Z? Because the 12Z didn't work.
It finally did. It finally got it all in. So this is the 18Z, and across the rest of the country, we're seeing, by the way, there's a little bit of snow moving up into northern Montana, where we have some winter storm watches up. I'm sorry, some winter weather advisories up, and that's really it. The weather in the west has been relatively stable. The Santa Ana's calmed down. It's not like they're not having that issue anymore. So that's a big plus. But you can also start to see, if you look down just south of Texas in Mexico, there's actually an upper low that's moving across there, and that's going to make a low in the western Gulf that's going to start coming eastward, and you see it here. Now, of course, here in the east, we've got this high going out, and since it goes up into New England, it does set up an onshore flow, and I mentioned the problems for Thursday. Tomorrow is just a sunny day, what I always call ineffective sunshine, and temperatures going absolutely nowhere. And then after that, the next real change, because if you notice, Joe, the rain is coming into the southeast and over Florida, but much of the rest of the country is pretty dry.
Right.
We've got the next cold front. Let me just erase and start from scratch. But, here's the next cold front. It's actually dropping down from the northwest. And if it wasn't for that, you would get this thing probably, as you pointed out earlier, this would probably come up the East Coast. But what's happening is, and the upper air shows it even better, but that front's pushing down with that high building in, and the low is forced to pretty much slowly get squashed. It takes a while for it to get out there, because by Sunday night it's still sitting off the North Carolina coast,
right? And
we're still dealing with the northeast wind. I was wondering about with the thing for Saturday and Sunday with this high in this position. This could be one of these deals where you've got all this dry air in New England, and it drains only so far south. A number of times over the last couple of years, it's wound up where the dry air actually drains further south, and we wind up with decent weather. I think Saturday probably looks like the better of the 2 days. I'm a little concerned with the onshore flow that we're going to have clouds at some point over the weekend as well, which will help hold temperatures down.
Look at that gradient, though, along the mid-Atlantic coast.
Yeah, very tight there.
The Outer Banks and the Virginia Capes will probably have some real gusty winds this weekend.
Yeah, if Ricky's watching, you're going to have some gales to deal with there off the southeast coast, off the North Carolina coast. And Robert Brown, too, if you're down in eastern North Carolina during this weekend, you're going to have to deal with that low. But it doesn't really, that rain never really advances northward. And then after that, I don't know, there's some leftover energy. There looks like there's another piece that comes out from the Gulf and tries to run up the coast. And
yeah.
Maybe it makes it, maybe it doesn't. And this is for the middle part of next week.
This is for when now? This is for Wednesday. Now that's not the 990 low that they had yesterday that was moving over.
Oh, it was. It was. This is now how it's handling it.
Okay.
It's got a much more fractured look to it.
Right.
I just go back to what I said yesterday and a few times lately, is the fact that you notice these lows are shooting out straight to the east. That's because there's nothing out in the Atlantic. There's not a whole lot of storm activity out in the Atlantic to kind of force these things to move northward. There's no log jam. And not to be one anytime soon. Probably not going to be one anytime soon. Now, after this, as far as the long range goes, let me bring the upper air up, and then I want to go to my long range post that I wrote today. So hang on one second.
Now this map right here, this is for.
It's the same date that popped up. So This is for Friday, this is for Thursday night, the 21st.
Right. So it looks like we're in kind of a ridge pattern here.
Yeah.
There may be, it might be.
There's short waves running around all over the place. There's one off the east coast, one in the southwest, one in the north.
Decently fair sky or whatever. And,
it should be reasonable. Yeah, we might have a couple of days where it's reasonable. I just kind of, when you look at the upper air, the thing that's changing is the fact that, we've had this, ridging up the West Coast and over Alaska. That's disappearing. This is that negative EPO pattern, that negative E-specific oscillation pattern. And that's going to break down to a large degree. So that kind of, we start to lose that Canadian connection after this weekend. And you can see that northern upper low drops down into southeastern Canada and just keeps that southern system just moving along. It can't lift up. There's nothing to bring it up. It's not phasing. Each one is going on its own separate, adventure here. The flow's kind of split. And then as you go out to the west, it just kind of looks to me like chess pieces are being moved around over time, over the, after this weekend for about a week or so. I tend to think that the pattern might get interesting toward the end of the month.
Okay.
Okay.
Toward Thanksgiving.
Toward or just after Thanksgiving. Right. I think we're going to see the table set for. I'm thinking that we could have a pretty interesting month of December.
The Farmer's Almanac, by the way, I don't know how many of you out there are into the Farmer's Almanac forecast, but they do make, and I'm not talking about the one with the yellow cover, that's the old Farmer's Almanac, the one with the orange color, that dates back only to 1818. They are forecasting, Joe, that there could be a significant storm on Thanksgiving Day that could be a problem for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and the balloons. They make a specific notation about
that one.
That particular day, that particular event, may be hindered by the weather on that day, the 28th of November.
So we're going to have to do a live stream on the 27th or the 26th.
Yes, while eating a turkey leg.
Yes. All right. So I said at the beginning we were talking about some climate things, and a number of people, and I don't know if you got it on your social media, but a number of people. Kind of chanting about, well, it's cold now, which means that it probably means that the winter's going to be a non-event. It's cold now, and that probably means this will be the worst winter we've ever seen in our lives. It snowed today, therefore, you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, there's just no way to point to something in any given year in a certain month while you might be able to look back in hindsight and say, okay, this now we see how things evolved, okay? But when you're looking ahead and you don't have the advantage of exactly knowing what's going to happen, you can't really look back at a climo year and say, well, this happened in this year, therefore everything is going to happen almost the same way afterward. It just doesn't work that way.
What we're talking about is what's called an analog
forecast. I have never been a fan of analogs. Well, I always find that the purpose of an analog is ultimately to reaffirm whatever your predetermined notion is about what you want to put out in the first place.
Well, it might work for a couple of days, 3 days, but if you're trying to base an entire season on one set of maps, you can't do it. You can't do it because you're just looking. Let's say at the North American continent, and you're saying, okay, everything will happen the way it did, like in 1958.
Right.
That's one way of looking at it. But the problem is you don't know what was driving that 1958 pattern. It may have been something significant up in Siberia, or in Europe,
or
like
North
that.
Atlantic, wherever. You don't know.
If you can't see the whole picture, then what's the sense of trying to do it?
Well, here's what struck me about the records that we're seeing for today. And it made me think back to last November, because I think, as I recall, right around Thanksgiving last year, we wound up with a fairly solid shot of cold air.
Right.
And I remember, I think you and I, when we did some air stuff at the time, I remember saying, one of the things about this is it a shot across the bow? Is this a sign of where we're going? Or is it just, kind of a fluke thing that happens and the pattern is going to go on its merry way, which is ultimately what it did with the Pacific Jet. And that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. But 2 years that come up in the records, just as an example for tonight and for tomorrow, 2001, okay, and 2013. And you wind up with the extreme outcome on both ends, because if you look at November of 2001 is the record for the record low for islip tomorrow morning. Okay, it's also the record low for this date if they get it at midnight.
Right.
2001. The winter of 2001, 2002 was, I believe, in New York City, Central Park, was the second least snowiest winter on record.
Right.
And it was a warm. I believe it was a La Nina year, a strong La Nina year. So we got hardly any snow. And as I recall it, very few days where the temperature had to fight to go below freezing.
Right.
So that's on the one extreme. The record for tomorrow, the record low high temperature for islip tomorrow, which is, it's broken. 39 is the old record. It's never going to get anywhere close. It'll be 30, we'll get to 33 or 4 and stop, was in 2013. Now, in 2013, the winter of 2013, there have only been, and I could probably count them on one hand, the number of winters that I can remember that were basically started early. 95, 96 was one of them. First snowfall in 95, 96 came in the month of November, right after Thanksgiving. I remember we got 4 inches out where I was on Long Island from that, and I think I saw the city stat got like 2 something. But 95, 96 was one of those. But 2013, 2014 was unrelenting. I had snow cover from the first snowfall that winter, which came I think in early December. I did not see bare ground again until the last day of winter, right before the first day of spring.
Wow.
Where finally we still had piles.
Right.
And I also remember Lake Ronkonkoma, where I lived near, was frozen up until about the first day of spring. So you wound up, if you want to look at the kind of weather and say we set records on this year, therefore this is going to happen. Well, I just gave you 2 completely opposite sides of the equation. Okay,
right.
You're on both ends of the pole here. You had extremely an extreme winter and an extreme non-winter. So that's why you can't look. That's why I try to tell everybody, follow the pattern. Okay, follow what's going on. Don't try to make it happen. Okay.
The trend is your friend.
The trend is your friend, and the trend, there's a short-term trend and a medium-term trend and a long-term trend.
Right.
The long-term trend is the hardest one to figure out. The short-term trend is usually pretty easy, and you could have some good, you could have some good luck with the medium trend. But the long-term trend is an awfully tough one. So I want to go through some of the differences that we had. By the way, Ryan, thank you very much. Ryan hit Super Chat. Thank you so much from both of us. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm hoping that I see you, by the way, in Bayonne next Wednesday at the Bayonne Library at 7 o'clock. So if those of you who are in New Jersey, come out. Bayonne Library, Bayonne, New Jersey, next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So I pulled this up from last year. We remember this, right, Joe?
Yes, sir.
The Pacific Fire Hose jet, that unrelenting jet that basically was a straight line. You could almost walk from Japan to Virginia in a straight line and not really bump into anything. There was, the Pacific was just really a mess. And that jet was the dominating feature, except for a very, very short time in February last year when we got really, really cold. And then it came roaring back with the cold air, and we wound up with mostly, a snow to ice to rain event anyway.
Right.
So, but the bottom line is the Pacific jet appeared early. This map was back from last January 7th. And the one thing that we can say right now is that the Pacific looks absolutely nothing like this.
Right. In fact, do we have the blob? Remember that weather phenomenon? What was it the batch of unseasonably warm water off of the Gulf of Alaska?
Well, that's up in the Gulf of Alaska. I can pull up the Pacific water temperatures if you'd like. We can do that.
Supposedly that had a major say in the weather in the past few winters.
Well, it's been argued that it has been argued. I would just the thing is, there's more. There has to be more to it because I don't know if it was last winter or the winter before. Everybody was kind of pointing to the warm water that was up in the Gulf of Alaska, but it didn't exactly play out the way you thought it would play out. So I get I kind of get a little nervous about always, trying to depend on one, that one magic bullet type of thing.
Right.
I know a few people have actually recently talked about the warmer than normal waters that are up in the Gulf of Alaska. And one of my buddies said, Bill Goodman from the Weather Service, mentioned in a conversation I had about, when the warmer water is closer to the land, it's as opposed to being, further offshore. If it's closer to the land, that just kind of forces the idea of the ridge being further west, and that you wind up, with the cold air being delivered to the east,
Right.
rather than being delivered when it's more offshore. Then you get the trough is much further to the west.
Right.
We'll see. Bottom line is, we have no Pacific fire hose, because if you look at this pattern in the Pacific, and I'll bring up the Pacific map right now that matches this time frame. I'll just go back. I'm not going to usually look at the long range, but if you look at it at the moment, I mean, you do see there's much more amplitude. You've got, deep weather system there south of the Aleutians, troughing that goes just, east of Hawaii. You've got weather systems, it's much more of an up and down look, was when I talk about amplitude. And you have an upper high in the west, off the west coast, that pushes up the west coast, and the deep trough in the east. So you go from, you've got this is the look that we have. This is actually from back on Tuesday. So I went back a couple of days. This is Tuesday, November 12th. And this is what we had last year out in the Pacific. So clearly you can see that the upper pattern is completely different. So that's one major change. And by the way, if the folks could see it here, move it back a little bit more, you can see the big ridge that's just inland of the East Coast, building all the way up toward Hudson's Bay. That's not cold. That's warm. So one of the things I noticed going forward, and the European I thought was pretty interesting today. Now I just pulled out. I went out day 9, and I noticed a number of things. First off, the model seems to want to go to a split flow in the west. And I always love split flows because they can be really exciting, and they can be very exciting to forecast. But this kind of has it has a very interesting look to it. The upper low in the east, you're getting a cold Canadian connection, so we might lose it for a little bit, maybe for a few days later next week. Mm-hmm. But then it seems like the European wants to bring this look back. And I looked at the GFS ensembles today, which I don't often do, and they kind of have a similar idea. It just takes a couple of extra days to get there, but it does have it going to this sort of blocky split flow look to it after about this is November 21st, so say after about the 25th or 6th.
Well, take a look at the. You've got a very significant upper level high pressure system over the Pacific Northwest, centered, it seems like right over Seattle or Vancouver, and then you had that. It's not quite there yet, but an almost like a Baja type closed low that is getting ready to swing into the Baja California area. The dichotomy between those two types of pressure patterns is very, very significant indeed. And you're right, Joe. This is a type of split flow pattern that could very well be meaningful if you're into active weather sometime down the road after this.
Yeah. Now it's going to be interesting to see if we get here. It'll be interesting to see if the chess pieces move around in such a way that we wind up getting to this sort of look, because as we both know, it's all fine and dandy to see it on day 9. You want to see it on day 3 and 4.
3 or 4,
right?
Yeah.
See it on day 9. You kind of you get your eyebrows raised a bit, but you see how I drew the arrows in just to show the upper flow and how it splits in the Pacific, and you have part of it going into the northwest, part of it drops in the southeast. And by the way, I'll bring up the teleconnections, which will at least give you the snapshot if you want to see how it all adds up with the pressures, the changes in pressure. Just open that up here on this window and make it bigger. You do see the teleconnections off of last night's run. Take that North Atlantic Oscillation, the NAO, it brings it down to neutral and actually goes slightly negative after the 20th of the month through the end of the month. And the EPO is not that discouraging. It does go slightly positive, but it never really goes strongly positive,
Right.
where you'd have a trough in the west.
No spike of
No,
thing.
and then it just kind of lays along the neutral line. So I can live with that. And then, the PNA is very strong now, goes to the neutral line, and then just kind of comes up a little bit off the neutral line toward the end of the period. So
Right.
the teleconnections, at the very least, Joe, from the snapshot run from last night, they're saying, in my view, that the pattern's going to relax a little bit. Things are going to kind of rearrange themselves slightly, and then we're going to things are going to sort of they're going to find their way to settle someplace at the end of the month, and then we can go forward from there.
Right. We'll see.
We'll see. That's my view of things. No guarantees from the management as far as whether the long range is going to be correct or not. But we give it the old try.
Good old college try.
And I know the vast majority of you that are watching are snow lovers, and we both get that. And I would just say to some of the young forecasters out there, you have to kind of learn to draw your emotion away from it. You'll find that it's a lot easier to take your emotions out of wanting to have snow the minute you realize that you have to drive to work in it on a regular basis.
Yes.
Because once you do that, you don't want it to snow anymore. And you don't even want it to snow on your days off because they're your days off. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, I had the same emotions for snow as a very young man all those many years ago. And I think I told the story before that my mom put the Malocchio on me.
Yeah.
She said, there's going to come a time in your life when you're not going to like this kind of weather. And believe it or not, I have a very long driveway, Joe. And guess who has to clear that driveway whenever we have more than a couple of inches of snow?
Mrs. Rayo.
Mrs. Rayo. Well, I'll tell you something. Mrs. Rayo had to do it all those times because, sorry, honey, I got to be at work. They need me to forecast the weather and this big storm. So they didn't. And guess what? Now, moi will probably be at home.
I have this wonderful Troy-built 6-speed snowblower, and I would not let my wife even so much as touch it because I just knew that if she threw it one gear off the wrong way, she'd find herself somewhere in Long Island Sound. So I just said, no. I do the snow blowing, and that's it. And thank God I had it, because with all the big storms I've had over Long Island in the last 19 years or so, it certainly has been used. Okay, I got it. Let me run through everybody here with Super Chat and thanking you again. Johnny Quest, Ryan Ford, Izzy D, maybe I can make it to the Lakewood Library now. Maybe I can. So let them know that I'm available, and we'll see if we can.
For you, Joe.
I don't mind if
Lakewood, New Jersey.
I can stop and see Alan. I don't know if I do that.
Oh, that's great.
Mahogany 2680, Izzy D again. Mac Attack, Izzy D again. Scott Briller, the chairman. Javon Perry, thank you so much. I'm sorry you didn't get the snow I thought you were going to get, by the way, Javon. I'll try again next time. I was way too aggressive with this. I suddenly realized the next morning that there was a huge dry slot, and I was like, I cringed. Livingston, Williamson, Thompson III. Thanks for hitting Super Chat. Really appreciate it. Mark Gladfelter, thank you very much. Anthony Orr, our other resident statistician. Digger 310, Timothy Veltman, and Johnny Quest. All of you, thank you so much.
I feel like I'm working at WBAI. WBAI is a non-commercial, listener-supported radio station here in New York. They actually were taken off the air for about a month. They just came back on the air now in the last few days, and they survive only by way of listener-supported, funds. I almost feel like I'm at WBAI now, because they're always reading off these people who've sent them money.
Yeah. Well, it's very, very kind that everybody did. Hey, Izzy has a good question. How often do they update the records, meaning making the normal highs and normal lows? Is it every 10 years, every 30 years? The last time they updated did it go up or down?
Well, the long-term period in the climatological record, the long term is 30 years, and one would expect that every 10 years they would just simply update that.
Which is what they've been doing.
Which is what they've been doing. It's not, they don't do it like at 30 years and then they're going to wait 30 more years for another update. No, they do it at 10-year increments, but it's a 30-year period is what is considered to be a long-term period. Although some of us, sometimes when we do these extended, we go all the way back to like 100 years.
One of the interesting, I did that with snow. Yeah. I did that with snow in Central Park. I went back all the way back.
Right.
And, a couple of things. First of all, next year, at the end of 2020, I think that's the next 10-year period,
right.
2019. So they're going to update update it again. So you're going to see your snowfall averages went from, in the 70s, the snowfall average of the prior 30 years, the average was 29.5 at Central Park. When they moved it along, when they made the normals in 2000, the average snowfall in New York City was 20. Okay, when they redid them in 2010, they were up to 25 and a half.
Right. Because
the 70s and 80s and 90s were the three least snowiest decades on record. Well, now we're going to have two of those least snowy decades are still in the equation. One is not. One more comes out. So on the next one, you're going to have the least snowiest decade ever, which was the 90s.
Right.
Believe it or not.
In spite of the blizzard of 96 and that winter of
93, 94.
Yeah.
But the other 8 winters were so far below normal that the numbers were horrible for the 10 years. But the next group is going to be from 1990 to 2020. And I did, I ran the numbers, and I think it worked out, if I remember correctly, if we wound up, we had to get at least 10 inches or 15 inches of snow last winter. We got 20. The normal's going to jump from in New York City. The normal's going to jump from 31 from 25 to 30 to like 30 and a half, 31, depending on what this winter does.
Right.
The Long Island average at Brookhaven is going to jump. God. It's going to jump from 35 to 43.
I can't believe it.
Okay, 43, and I have to tell you. That the winter in that 2013-14 winter, I had my third, in the years I've been out on Long Island, that was the third snowiest winter I ever had. I finished that winter with 75 inches for the season.
That's amazing.
I had 2 snowier ones, which is the 96 one, which I had 96 inches in 96. And the 2002-2003 winter, I had 78 inches that winter.
Incredible.
It's just crazy stuff.
Don't forget also that I think that there was one time span where Central Park had, I may be wrong, 4 consecutive years where it was 40 or more inches.
Yes, 2002, 3, 4, and 5, those winters.
Right.
02, 03, 03, 04, 04, 05, and 05, 06.
Unbelievable.
And that had never happened before. And in all those winters, I had 60 plus, and one of them I had 78. So those were huge winters out by my highway. It was crazy. It was just nuts. So, your numbers are a little deceptive. You got it. The long-term average in New York City at Central Park is about just under 29, which I always like to use that number. I used to fight with Joe Punday, the weather producer at Channel 11 in the morning show, because he would always use that normal. I said, you can't use the 20-inch normal. You just can't use it. It's sacrilege, okay? There's no way.
Another thing that's going to change, I think, is December. December always used to be like a throwaway month for snow.
Well, December went up in the last calculation.
Yeah.
And, it's going to go up. I think it goes up over, it was down to 2 inches in the 70, 80, 90 calculation. Right. I think it's going to be up over like 6.5 again.
Wow.
It used to be, going into those 30 years, that was a pretty active month.
Right.
Well, and I think we may wind up having a busy December this year.
We'll see.
And we won't have to drive in it. All right, so we're coming up to the top of the hour, Mr. Rayo. Do you have any parting thoughts for our studio audience?
None. I have
none.
I just want to thank everybody for watching, coming out tonight. I hope we have a big audience for our final get together tomorrow, and it's mind-numbing to me because I have tried. People have been asking me where you're going to land, and I have made a concerted effort to try to land at another broadcasting outlet over these past 3 months since we got the news in August that this was going to happen here at FiOS 1. And as I've said to a number of people here, some people who we've worked with who got interviews at some of these outlets, I got nothing. Nobody opened the door for me, because you have to understand that in the television world, they're all aiming at the younger demographic, and they just do not want a person who is been in the business, the broadcasting business, for over 40 years, even though that person in the last 24 years in television has had any number of citations and awards and 8 Emmy nominations. I actually thought I was going to get a couple of phone calls, and I got nothing. And I guess that's the way the TV
Emmys are
world is.
wonderful things. Emmys are wonderful things. They
don't pay the mortgage. They don't pay.
They make great doorstops after
Yeah.
a while. They don't get you a job. They just don't.
Yeah,
It's their, it's
I
wonderful that personal achievement and to be recognized by your.
I've not won an Emmy. You have won a few Emmys.
Two.
I've been to the plate 8 times and have struck out all 8 times. However, I will say, just to get the invitation to go and get the opportunity to possibly get an Emmy, a nomination, is something in itself to be proud of. You would think that somebody who has that in on his resume or on his CV would get a look, and I've gotten no looks whatsoever. In fact, I will tell you, Joe, that I had 3 possibilities of landing a position, or at least a part-time position, at a television station in the New York area, and I thank the chief meteorologist at each outlet. I will not mention names, but the chief meteorologist made a concerted effort on my behalf to get me in, but they were overruled by somebody higher up on the food chain who obviously must have said, no, he's too old, or no, he's not the right gender,
Yeah.
or any number of things. And
It is the reality of the business we work. Look, Joe, when I was 40, when I got let go, when I was freelancing at WNBC, when I got let go in 2008 before the financial the meltdown, and I was let go by a phone call by the secretary because the news director just didn't have the guts to pick up, either the guts or just didn't have the good, what's the word I'm looking for that now escapes me? Protocol, maybe? Kindness, to pick up the phone and just say, I'm sorry, but, things are not, we're going in a different road. Whatever lie they would make up, it's just the fact that, I just sort of just got a phone call say, hey, we're not going to use you anymore. Click. And, I could just tell you, I spent 5 years, the phone never rang.
Right.
I worked.
It's amazing. Shame
I worked
on the New York industry.
Well, I worked for 22 years, and nothing. I couldn't even get a return phone call.
And you see, the thing is, they look for young, and they look
Right.
for people to appeal to the young demographic. People who are coming out of college in the field of weather, and they may know all the thermodynamics and everything else, and they may have
Common courtesy, that's what I was.
a common courtesy, indeed.
Right.
But they may know their weather from a thermodynamic sense of view, but they've not had the empiricism. They've not gone through the wars. I once remember Dorothy Hamill when she won the gold medal. She said, I had to slip on the ice any number of times before I finally got it right or whatever.
Right.
The two of us, early in our careers, I'm
We
sure
slipped
you
a
must have
lot of
blown-
times. Sure, of course
must have
we did.
blown a lot of, but then you learn. Mm-hmm. You learn how to do that, and you learn some tricks of the trade, or just get that gut feeling or gut intellect in a very tough forecasting situation. Young people don't have that yet. And yet, even though we may be, I think the two of us, 80-year experience between the two of us, I think the two of us know about weather in this particular area as much or as better as anybody else.
Yeah,
Yet,
I won't argue with you.
And yet, the hierarchy at all of these news outlets and TV outlets will prefer to go with somebody with not as much experience, that they are packaged better.
They also can pay, the reality is, especially in the New York market, they're not paying me union scale. They were paying me more.
Right.
So it's a dollars and cents thing, and see, that's the one thing. And I had thought about this. I was thinking about this on and off lately, and it's so true. When we went to school, you get a rounded education. You try to get a rounded education. I wish that they had given us a little bit more from the standpoint of business. Because at the end of the day, the one thing that we forgot, and I think a lot of us that come out in this field when we did, we wanted television, but we didn't have a sense we didn't have a sense that it was a business. And at the end of the day, a business runs the way a business runs.
Right.
And we were, I know I was probably. It took me a while to learn and accept the fact that that's how things are.
Right.
But it just continues now. Now it's just our industry. From when we started in the early 1980s, salaries have gone down, and just like this, right? People go back to the 80s, are making more money then than they are now. That just is a fact, and I don't want any part of it anymore. I just don't.
And people have asked me about radio because they know that for 17 years I was on radio, and also here in New York I was on WABC, WPLJ. I spent 2 years as the morning meteorologist at 1010 Winds here in New York. I had all of the data lines coming in, allowing me to sound like I was right there at 1010 Winds at the studio in Manhattan, even though I was in Levittown, Long Island. But the thing is, and when I got started, I had the AMS, the American Meteorological Society seal of approval in radio. Back in the day, there must have been about 200 or 300 people who had that seal.
Right.
Today, there are maybe 10 or 12 people left in the radio business who still hold on to the seal.
How many radio people how many radio stations across the country even have their own meteorologist anymore?
I'm one of the few who has held on to that AMS seal, thinking that maybe when something like this happened. But you know what? Radio has changed. I was on personality. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was personality radio. I would sit with the disc jockey or the morning personality and chat for 4 or 5 minutes. Not just about weather, but about anything. Right. Off the top of the head. Turn on a radio station today to get the weather, and you will hear the following. Well, blah, 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 weather for tonight, clear skies, 46. Tomorrow, sunny and 72.
Sunny right today, now, high in the mid-80s. Clear tonight, low mid-60s.
Right now, it's 46 degrees right now at K104. Yep. Boom. That's it. That's it. That's all. And they ain't going to pay anybody significant money just to simply tell them that.
No. And in the few, some stations that do have them, those weather people actually have to, they make money by selling their own ad time. So not only do they have to do the weather work, but they have to go out and sell their own ad time, which is just crazy.
AccuWeather, I learned this today from a friend of mine. AccuWeather is on a radio station in the Hudson Valley, WHUD.
By the way, hold on. 27 Nor'easter, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Thank you. WHUD in the Hudson Valley has AccuWeather. But AccuWeather doesn't make a cent off of WHUD. It's kind of like a barter deal with them, between them and the radio station, commercial time or ad time or whatever. So it's not making them any significant money for doing the weather, but they do it because they're AccuWeather and they need to be on the air.
Right.
And so that's the way it goes. So really, for all the people who said, "Well, go to radio," radio is a
dead industry.
It's a dead issue.
Well, I spent 5 years. Outside of weather, working full time, and then I started freelancing again. You helped me out so much to freelance over at News 12 Westchester.
Yeah.
And I did some work back at News 12 Long Island, and then I got.
Before you continue, I should tell you, you were the one who opened the door for me for television, because I was not able to get into television. And then when News 12 Long Island opened up in 1986, and then you were there, and I said, is there any way that I can get into News 12 Long Island? And sure enough, there was an opening. And I started filling in for you
Right.
and the Roberto,
Yes.
and Norm Devoskin on weekends or whatever. But that got me started. I filled in 300 or 400 times at News 12 Long Island
sure.
before News 12, and it was so funny when Joe came back. What was the situation that you were freelancing?
I started freelancing again because I found myself I really wanted to come back to it
And
after
you
a couple
came-
of years of not doing it.
And you knocked on the door at News 12
I
Westchester.
also needed the money.
Yeah. I mean, you knocked on my door at News 12 Westchester, and I said, "By God, Joe, come on in." And you started filling in at News 12 Westchester, and it was so strange. I said, "You gave me my chance in television, and now here you are, all these."
And
years
then we
later."
wound up back together. And the time I spent away, I wound up getting back on Channel 11 on a freelance basis as well. After I had been there from 1996 to 2007, and that was another that's losing that job was very hard on me because of the fact that I loved working there. It was a great place to work. There was never a single day that I went in where I, regretted going in, didn't want to go in, didn't feel like working. I never had a single day there where I had a problem
And it
with
showed up on
anybody.
the air. Now we
it was
go back
such
to the
a
story about Noreen giving you those 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I think the audience enjoyed watching you. They were watching somebody who was exceedingly happy in doing the work and conveying that information to all of the masses who were watching Pix 11.
Well, and that in that particular instance, what happened was, and it's mind-boggling because on the weekends at the time, and I worked with one of the best reporters I think in the New York market, bar none. I worked with Mary Murphy,
Oh,
who I
goodness.
loved. Made my weekends an absolute joy working with her. A consummate professional, an absolutely terrific anchor, an absolutely terrific. I can't even come up with the right adjectives to describe how good this woman is as a reporter. She's unbelievable. I find myself, when I've watched her stories over the years, just riveted sometimes by the way she tells her stories, and she's got this wonderful, very interesting series that she does, and going back when she looks back at some old crimes, and not that they're solving, but she looks at the people that were involved in
Right.
those crimes and the what's happened to victims and how they've come forward. Just very, very touching pieces. But I worked with her. We had we were beating Fox on most weekend nights, which was our competition straight up. And I guess I'm at the point now where I just really don't care anymore. But the general manager of the station, who had already spent a lot of her time getting rid of a lot of the older talent and replacing them with very capable younger talent at lower prices, because that's how the business goes.
That's how it is.
But she eventually came. I was the last one. And I was protected to a certain extent by a certain upper management person who I don't want to say who it is, because I've worked with him also wonderful all the way through, and probably the reason why I'm here now to a large extent. But I don't want to give it away. But the thing is, she finally got around to me. And she did it in a really devious way, and it was, it left me bitter. And there was one thing I think if I could undo one thing in all of that. Let's say everything happened the same way. There's one thing I wish I should not have done. When they got rid of me, they decided to get rid of me. They had no replacement for me, so they found They gave me an exit date, and then they said, "Can you possibly work another few weeks because we don't have your replacement here?"
Oh.
And
You talk about chutzpah, folks.
well, look, the reality is when you have at this time, so it's 2008. I have 3 kids in Catholic school with expensive tuitions. I'm sorry, one of them is already in college. One is about to start college. I didn't have any choice.
Yeah.
And I had the health insurance. So I had to say, okay, fine. If I could undo that one, I should have not. If I could undo that, that's the one thing I would undo. I would have just walked out and said no. And that's kind of where I'm at this point.
See, all you kids who want to get into TV, what happens sometimes?
But I should look. All businesses, this stuff happens everywhere. It doesn't just happen in TV. It happens in all over the place. So there's nothing unique here. It's just that you get to see it and hear about it a lot, or you might read it online, or you should say read it in a newspaper. But there's another side to this equation, and the other side of this equation is the man who, when I wanted to work full time, I picked up the phone and called, and he called Brian Fitzgerald, who said, sure, we'd love to have him come. And I started freelancing here and at FiOS, and I was here at the right place at the right time when Jeff DeNoyer, who was working weekdays here, went to Providence, and Mark Weiner asked me to, if I wanted that job at night. And that was the one position that I never held in my career, was a prime time evening. And it doesn't really mean that much anymore, but it meant something to me.
Right.
That was the one thing I had never been able to do. I came so close in so many markets where I had all these jobs that I was offered that wound up not happening for all sorts of odd reasons. But this was my chance. I got it. I did my 5 years here now. 2014, I want to say. So 5 years. It was fantastic. And if I won't do another day of TV. I'm good with it.
Well,
I set out. I did what I wanted to do, and that was, and I did it.
You told me when I came here in December of 2016, we're going to have a blast, and for the last 3 years, we've been having a blast every single day.
Well, that bottle of scotch we open up on a weekly basis, that you and I go through. No, only kidding.
If you saw
it's only half a bottle.
If you saw the last episode of MASH, the 2.5 hour movie that everybody tuned in for, the end of the Korean War, there's that scene at the end of MASH where BJ and Hawkeye are saying goodbye to each other, and it's going to be probably tomorrow. It'll be probably very much like that.
Well, we'll do it tomorrow. We're not going to do it today.
No, we're
going to do it tomorrow.
Today.
And again, to reiterate, folks, we're
We're
this
not
show,
going anywhere.
Right? The show's the Joe and Joe show is going to continue. I'm going to get my audio in sync at home on that darn new Windows 10 computer of mine, and I'll be Skyping him in. So I'm probably not going to be able to do it every night, but we're certainly going to try to get we'll do it at least once a week. Maybe we'll get you on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee on the new Coffee with Chaffee show, or Chaffee with
pull
Coffee.
Up a chair. We'll get Mrs. Rayo in on it too. She's a
But
meteorologist.
she'll only stay for 10 minutes. She can only. Actually, you know what she could do, Joe?
Recipes.
Well, while she's, you know what? We'll get them out the camera like we have here on the computer. You mount it at home. We'll double Skype it both ways. Yeah, have her make the cake she made for me that I asked her to make.
Oh
remember?
yeah, the buttercream.
That was the butter pecan cake. That was insane. And I'm not a fan. I'm not a cake eater at all. But I saw this recipe for this butter pecan cake, and when I tell you, it was probably about 6 inches high.
Yeah.
Okay. It cuts into one slice of this cake. Okay, 800 calories. I forgot how many sticks of butter was in it. 20 sticks of butter between the frosting and the cake itself. I can just minimize that.
No, I just wanted to see.
Yeah.
There was a message there, and I just wanted to
there you go.
get a look at it.
Which one?
I thought it was something other than the Izzy thing, but I thought it was something else.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just scrolling up to see if there's anything. Door closes, 2 more will open. It's hard to stay positive when something like that happens, but Joe, you have a great following now and still growing, and we love you. Thank you so much, my German Shepherd Daphne, and by Joe, I think she means both of us. Look.
Don't do that with the "we love you" because that nearly brought Alex Trebek to tears last night.
Well, no, we appreciate it. I definitely, I tell you something. And you and I have had conversations with you about, because your YouTube channel is Joe Rayo Weather. If you haven't subscribed to
Right.
Joe Rayo Weather, this is your opportunity to subscribe to Joe Rayo
Well,
Weather.
now that I'm going to have a lot of free time on my hands in the coming weeks, I may just work on that channel, get the OBS thing on my computer.
Right, which is right here.
And
Yeah, it's
and so we'll see how
learning
it goes.
curve. After that, you'll be fine.
Right.
But no, but it all, I never would have thought. I guess maybe in a fantasy I might have had many years ago, thinking that wouldn't it be cool if I had my own channel, or wouldn't it be cool if we had our, if you had your own channel.
Right.
People could have their own channels. Who knew that we would get to a point, technology-wise, that back then that we would be able to do that? And I have to tell you something. If I were 20 years younger, okay, and especially if I were 30 years younger, but if I was, I'll just give it 20. I won't ask God for much. But if I was 20 years younger, this whole format is perfect for me. I love it. I
Okay.
love every minute of it.
Okay.
And God knows where it's going to take me in the next couple of years, but it'll be sure as hell fun to find out.
We'll see. We'll see.
All right, we're coming up on 20 after 8 o'clock, folks. So it's been a wonderful hour and 20 minutes. One more time, let me just give big thanks to 27 Nor'easter, Timothy Veltman, Scott Briller, Izzy D, Brad Doherty, Izzy D, Johnny Quest, Ryan Ford, Izzy D, Brandon Doherty, Mahogany 2680,
I can't read with the
Izzy D,
Izzy D again. Mac Attack.
Mag Attack,
Izzy D.
Scott Briller, Javon
Javon
Perry,
Perry.
Livingston Williamson Thompson III, Mark Glatfelter, thank you, Anthony Orr, Digger 310, Timothy Veltman, and Johnny Quest.
And where's Thurston Howell III?
And well,
He's not watching tonight.
he's not. So listen, we got to go, guys. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you for your wonderful generosity. One more night together, Joe and I, here in the studio, and that's the end of our FiOS time. And we will then after that
Who's bringing the
we'll see
box
what
of
happens.
tissues tomorrow?
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see anyway. All right.
We'll get it out of the closet somewhere. They got tissue. Ralph's got tissues and
Okay.
and paper towels and things.
Okay.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.
See you
Take care.
tomorrow.
Good night.